automatic reaction. You know?
Good evening and welcome to a regular meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. This evening is the evening of October 3rd. It's Tuesday at 6 p.m. I'd like to invite you to stand and join us in the invocation tonight, led by Pastor Randy Beamer with the Oak Harbor Christian Reformed Church. And please remain standing when I will lead the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to just have a moment of silence during our prayer, just so that you're aware. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for this meeting. We ask for your blessing on our decisions tonight for our city. And we thank you for many people, Lord, in our city. Educators and people in the military, people who are in governance, people who lead us, people who serve us. Lord, there are many servant hearts that work hard to help our city, the people in our city, to flourish. We pray that you would give us the joy of your saving grace in this city. Lord, we recognize that tonight that the city of Las Vegas has been through a lot of turmoil this week. And we pray, Lord, in seeing the effects of sin and evil in the world, we pray that you would bring comfort, that you would bring healing and your mercy to the people of Las Vegas. Lord, be with us also in giving us the peace that you bring to the world, the kind that unites us rather than divides us. Give us tonight the wisdom from heaven. It's the kind of wisdom that, first of all, is pure, is then peace-loving, is considerate, is submissive, is full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Lord, we ask for these gifts from you. We ask for your blessing upon us all. For it is in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have one city council member absent tonight, and I assume we need a motion to, yes,
I
Councilor
move we
Munson.
excuse Councilman Rick Allenberg from the
Second.
meeting.
Motion to excuse Councilman Ollenberg, motion by Munn, second by Campbell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll start with the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make there? Okay, seeing none. We are going quickly through to our citizen comment period. Citizens may comment on subjects of interest not listed on the agenda or items listed on the consent agenda. To ensure comments are properly recorded, please state your name clearly into the microphone. Please limit comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. So, anybody wishing to come to the podium? Okay. Yes. I'm sorry? Okay. This is during regular comment? No, this is probably, I would assume, later. I see Kathy Phillips come in, but I think you're not regular comment period, right? You've signed to speak, but that's on the agenda. Okay. Okay. Okay, seeing no citizens for regular comment, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We've got consent agenda items for A, B, and C. Does anybody wish to? Okay, seeing none, the consent agenda will be approved as presented. Man, we're really moving here tonight. Mayor's comments. I have just one quick announcement to make. Recognition of National Community Planning Month. October is National Community Planning Month. This is when our planner likes to come out and speak for 10 or 15 minutes, but we've asked him not to do that tonight. I'm kidding. Happy National Community Planning Month, planners. And item number 2, actually, Senior Center is hosting a 2-part series, documentary and discussion on coming of age in aging America, with part 1 on October 5th and part 2 on October 12th. Both will be held at the Oak Harbor Library, and there are flyers, I believe. We have some out in our front lobby to advertise this. So, coming of age in aging America, documentary and discussion. Okay, with that, I'll turn to council. Any council comments? Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Several of us attended the neighborhood meeting today, and Rear Admiral Gary Mays, who's our regional commander of Pacific Northwest, was making some comments about the sailors in the area, and the land that he oversees is 4 states and stuff. But he made a comment, and I think it caught some of us by surprise. He was saying they sent sailors down to Texas and Louisiana and Florida to help after the hurricanes. And they also have some ships, a certain amount of, in a sense, battleships, and the Comfort, which is a hospital one, to go to Puerto Rico. And these ships have the ability to make fresh water. And they just need containers, and they put it in. They can't actually hook it up to a city system. But I think we forget, and that is not in the news. It's not in the papers. But we are truly blessed to have this in our country, much less right here in our neighborhood. We know that how much that they help when the river rises in Mount Vernon, or there's a fire or whatever. We need hazmat. They help out our fire department, vice versa. We help them on things, but I think sometimes we just forget these are multi-talented people that will fly if told to around the world to help out. So I just wanted to say that was pretty neat to hear about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Anyone else? Council? Okay, we'll move. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Eisen. Sorry.
Thank you. I also want to wish our planners and Steve Powers in particular happy Community Planning Month. I know it's the most wonderful time of the year. I also want to let council know that I'm going to be absent for our next meeting on October 17th. Okay. And I read with much sadness in the newspaper that Dee Harbour passed away. And for those of you who don't know or don't attend on a regular basis, she was a regular visitor to our council meetings. She spent a long time giving back to the community. She was on, I think, both the city and the county park board and the garden club, and I think the Gary Oak Society. I might be wrong. But she was a familiar face, and she had no problem coming to these meetings and letting us know exactly how she felt about a lot of issues, but mostly I think about beautifying our city. You know, she spent her life in Oak Harbor trying to leave this a more beautiful place than she found it, and I think that we're really lucky to have citizens like that. So she will be missed, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank her and her family for their contributions.
Nice job, Councilor Eisen. I totally agree. Dee was a very fine citizen. Anyone else? Okay. We will move on to City Administrator comments.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of comments for tonight. First, as you know, we've been having an ongoing discussion with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And this has to do with an outfall we've been wanting to design and build out on Scenic Heights, and we've run into the discussion of it being a stream. Of course, we all know there's a 35-foot bluff in there, so there's been some debate between Fish and Wildlife and the city as far as whether that's a stream or not. They actually came through this last week and agreed with us that it is not a stream. So that is very good news for us. In their information to us, they called it an artificially created water course. It's not defined as a river or stream. So they're going to go ahead and let us move forward with that project. So that's really good news. The thing I wanted to really point out, though, is we have a gentleman up in engineering, Alex Warner, who was working with Ecology and wrote a report to them and went back to the 1880s, actually, and came forward with all the information on that drainage area and was able to convince them that is, in fact, artificially created. So I really wanted to call out Alex and give him some kudos for doing some good work on that. That was really brought everybody together to the best solution on that. The next item is tomorrow. The state auditors are going to be visiting us at 1 o'clock, and this is for their exit conference. They're wrapping up their 2016 audit for last year's financials. So they'll be meeting tomorrow here at 1 o'clock p.m. It'll probably be a pretty quick meeting. Quick is always good with the state auditors, and it means we've got a little sneak preview of things they want to talk about. We actually had a pretty good audit, and we'll have some good news coming out of that meeting. And kudos to Finance and Patricia for working on that audit with them. Our schedule for the rest of this month, as you know, we have a council meeting on the 17th. That's at 6 o'clock. We have a regular workshop on October 25th at 2 o'clock. And for those of you that are involved with the investment committee, there's a meeting that same day at 1:30, just prior to the workshop. So the next and last item I have is to have Brett come up and give us an update on the clean water facility.
Well, good evening. It's time for our clean water facility project update. As I promised, we're starting to see all kinds of mechanical systems show up. This tank is actually part of our utility water system. We use our own effluent actually a lot in our treatment plant for sprays, washing, cooling, that type of things. We actually use 500,000 gallons a day recirculating. So this is a major piece, and also could play a part if we decide to move ahead with reuse. I'll talk about that later. We're starting to put roofs on buildings. This is the inside of our membrane building. Those little yellow handrails over there are actually the top of our membrane tanks. And so this building is actually, as of today, all covered up. This was actually last Friday. So we are putting the roofs on, and we're going to actually have the fabric people out probably in about a week and a half to finish that up. And as we finish up the other buildings, they'll be putting roofs on there too. In terms of recent activities, we are continuing work on the 90% design documents for Windjammer. We expect to see those documents on October 18th. We also are working on our SCADA development software. We did have a demonstration from Carollo on that system last week for our operators, and we do have an actually working workstation, set up, and so we actually can simulate how to operate the plant now. We still have some holes to fill in as the various manufacturers give us their development, but we're actually getting our operators some hands-on experience because we don't have any of these systems. Construction-wise, we're pouring concrete on GMPs number 8 and number 10. We hit a milestone last week. We poured over 10,000 yards of concrete on our self-performed contracts. That's 80% of the concrete. We're still ahead of schedule and below our labor estimates. We've been pounding on it. We've continued backfilling. That's kind of, right now, kind of spotty, but that's going to start picking up again as we start to finish these structures off. We are continuing construction activities for GMP number 9, which is the process mechanical, and number 11, which is more the architectural parts. Last week, we had 100 workers on site, and that'll probably go on through November, then it'll start tapering off a little bit. We are starting the self-perform wood framing on the admin building, so that'll be starting to come up, and we're starting to see some big timbers showing up on that project. And masons are still hard at work, and as I've shown earlier, we're roofing. So a lot of work going on. Funding-wise, I'm afraid there's nothing new on the SRF loan process. It's still in the legislature, and a lot of our funding opportunities are still waiting for that too. Upcoming major council decisions, we will bring back the reuse engineering study later in this meeting. I will bring the amended archaeological contract for ERCI. I'm planning on doing that the next council meeting, I think on the 17th. And we'd like to schedule a city council tour of the construction site in November, so I think we need to start talking about available dates for that. It's still out there, but right now there's a lot going on and there's a lot to see, and we'd like to see how we've done last year. Schedule-wise, we're still doing very well. We're on schedule. I had an interesting conversation with Hoffman this morning, where we have a lot of equipment that's coming through the submittal into the order process, and with the hurricanes and down in Texas and Florida, there's a lot of rebuilding going on, so we're starting to see a lot of demand. So we're having to be careful about making sure our stuff doesn't get pushed aside for hurricane removal. So we have, of course, all the stuff under contract, but it's kind of interesting. We're starting to worry about that because that's happened in the past for our deliveries, but we're pretty much on top of it and we're aware of it, so we're trying to get all our orders in. Public outreach, you can reach us at oakharborcleanwater.org. You can call us at 914-7000 or our work extensions. Email us at treatmentplan@oakharbor.org. And our next open house drop-in hours is October 10th. Questions?
Yes, Councilor Muntz?
Thank you, Mayor. If by chance we get backlogged when we shouldn't with a critical piece, would you let us know ahead of council meeting? I mean, when it happens, so it's like we're not reading it in the paper, please?
No, that's why I brought it up, because it was
Okay.
new news to us. I just heard about it this afternoon, and it is something we were watching. And the fact of the matter is, our team's aware of it, and we're talking to the vendors, and we're kind of letting them know that that excuse is probably not going to work very well for us.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Arvidsson. Appreciate the report. That's it? Okay. Done with the city administrator section. We're moving now towards ordinances and resolutions. Just a reminder to speak during a scheduled public hearing or meeting. Please sign in on the sheet in the back of the room. However, you would still have an opportunity during that time to ensure comments are properly recorded. Please state your name clearly into the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. So we're going to start then with item number 7A, Resolution 17-18, supporting amendments to the joint planning area boundary with Island County. And we have our Development Services Director, Steve Powers. Mr. Powers?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The mayor's done a great job introducing this particular item for you. I'll give the council a heads up. Both this presentation and the next one will look strangely familiar to you. They are derivatives of the ones that I've given to you twice in the last week. But there are some changes. So first of all, the purpose slide. So this one, the purpose of this one is to present to you a draft resolution for your consideration. If adopted, the resolution would support amendments to the joint planning area, our boundary with Island County. What I'll try to cover for you this evening quickly is some background on the topic, how the development of the JPA proposal took place, and then some of the details of the resolution itself. Resolution was provided to the council late today via electronically. It was also left at your places this evening, hard copy. The resolution and the map that are tied together were left for you. So some of this will be familiar, the joint planning area or JPA. First of all, there is an existing one. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Secondly, Resolution 1713, which was adopted earlier this year, as you recall, approved the amendments to the countywide planning policies, also gave some direction relative to the joint planning area. Council signaled your intent to Island County that you wanted to consider expanding the JPA. You set the general direction that you thought that you'd wanted to expand, which would be to the south and the southwest, and you requested priority growth area as consistent with the countywide planning policies. Following that, staff developed 2 options for the county's consideration. We sent both those options to the county on September 11th, along with a letter supporting the rationale for those boundaries. We've also conducted some briefings. We briefed you, of course, on the 19th. at your regular meeting, the Planning Commission at the 26th, and the council then on the 27th at your workshop just last week. In amongst those dates, the county sent us back a letter dated the 25th asking us to select one of the two options that we had proposed to them, also to provide them some additional supporting analysis. So by way of background again, this is the boundary of the southern portion of our existing joint planning area. Tim assures me that this laser is going to work. And so this area here is our existing urban growth area. The white is the area which is presently within the city limits. The goldenrod color is the area which is in the UGA, is either in the city or is not yet, I'm sorry, it is county land inside of the urban growth area. The blue and the pink are areas that are inside of the existing joint planning area. So south and southwest were the policy directive that the council gave via that resolution of 1713 in terms of areas to expand the JPA. Hopefully this graphic is familiar to the council. This was something that we put together to help visualize the process for identifying or developing a boundary for a JPA. The joint planning area itself, we should look for lands which are adjacent to the UGA, close to services, connected to transportation corridors, either existing or proposed. Try to avoid those areas of commercial significance and look to have logical boundaries. Not a lot of zigs and zags, straight lines where we can, avoiding donut holes is always one of the goals. The next two pieces on that slide, as the council will recall, really gave you some idea about how lands are designated inside of that JPA. If the county and the city choose to designate them, they can either be priority growth areas, which are ones which then will translate into lands that would most logically come into a UGA. And then there are auxiliary growth areas, which starting out would be lands which you would not think of as being part of a UGA, although they could transition over time or under certain sets of circumstances. So last week we gave you the sort of the background on the two options. I've narrowed that down to just the one option on this slide for you. Option A, which is the one that the council seemed to express interest in at your workshop. We believe it's consistent with your direction in Resolution 1713. We believe it's consistent with various aspects of the countywide planning policies. You can see those reasons why on the screen. I won't read those to you. And then to refresh everybody's memory as to the size, it's approximately 2,100 acres in size. Once we've set that boundary, again, we're back to that topic of map designations inside of it. By way of a reminder, established through the countywide planning policies. What I think we've said so far to the county is where they can be designated PGA, they should be. Just as a reminder, not all lands can be designated. Some of them will be designated as auxiliary growth areas. And then also, when we think about the sequences of lands moving from JPA to UGA, how that land is designated in the JPA has some bearing in how that transition may or may not take place. So all of that adds up to the option A map. So here is our existing joint planning area again. This area here is our existing urban growth area. This then is the area which the city is proposing to expand the JPA to include. This boundary the southern boundary here happens to be the northern boundary of the Eby's Preserve. We believe that using that as a boundary line is supported by one of the countywide planning policies. We also utilize straight lines, logical boundaries, following street patterns where we can, incorporating obviously the SR20 transportation corridor, et cetera, et cetera. So shifting gears from the map and how it was arrived at to the resolution itself. First off, it refers to the role of the countywide planning policies. Again, that's the basis by which we've been having the conversation for a JPA. Coincidentally and appropriately, it includes a definition of the joint planning area, so everybody knows what it is we're talking about. It restates your policy directive that we found in the previous resolution. And then, as we often do with resolutions, it recites the history of the topic. And in this case, we chose the July 26th date as our starting point, and then the things which have occurred since that point in time up until today. And then finally, it concludes by the council requesting that Island County, number one, amend the JPA boundary consistent with the option A map, and number two, designate lands priority growth area where consistent with the countywide planning policies. Just quickly on terms of getting back to the county on their letter to us of the 25th, we are working on a response to the county. We expect that that'll probably go out to them tomorrow. To a large degree, it restates many of the points that we made to them in our September 11th letter, but we're also bringing home the point that joint planning areas are not governed by this capacity concept that we've been talking about when we talk about urban growth areas. So in order to establish a JPA, we don't need to do any math, crunch any numbers that says we need X amount of acres in order to be in the JPA. That's a much different concept that applies only when we're talking about the urban growth area. And we're going to reinforce that point with our planning partners at Island County. You should be really used to seeing this slide by now. It shows you where we are on the schedule tonight with October 3rd's meeting. We've got some dates on there should they be necessary. We've also continued to reflect the dates that we expect that the county may take up the topic. So your recommendation this evening is that you approve Resolution 1718 supporting amendments to the joint planning area boundary with Island County consistent with the option A map and designate lands priority growth area where consistent with the countywide planning policies. I'd be happy to help you with your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Before we do that, we'll open this topic up to the public. Anyone that would like to speak to this topic is welcome to do so now. Please state your name clearly in the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Okay. Seeing none, then we'll bring it to council. Recommended action is to approve Resolution 17-18. What would the council like to do? Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you. I know this seems like a fairly recent topic, but I know that from talking to you, it's been in discussion for longer than the last couple of months with Island County. So I appreciate it coming to the forefront and
Thank you, Mr.
becoming a
Servadius.
definitive action. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank you, Mr. Powers, and your staff for this resolution, especially the one on the third whereas, and it says partly JPAs are jointly designated by the county and municipalities to reserve areas which may be necessary for future urban growth and to protect land which has been identified as resource land of long-term commercial significance. And with this planning for commercial areas for the future growth, they will contribute to economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Anyone else? Councilor Heisen?
I move to adopt Resolution 17-18.
Second.
So we've got a motion to adopt Resolution 1718, motion by Heisen, second by Munns. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so we are on to our next item, which is Resolution 17-17, supporting Island County further review of Wright's crossing application. That's item number 7B, and Mr. Powers is still at the podium, so I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Again, presentation will look fairly familiar to you, modified for tonight's purposes. Our purpose is, in fact, to present this resolution for your consideration. It would, if adopted by the council, support the county's continued review of the Wrights Crossing UGA application, and it would also commit city resources to assist in the review of that application at various stages. Similar to the last presentation, our goal this evening for you is to provide some background, some process, and then a little bit of detail about the resolution itself. little more text on this slide than I'm accustomed to having and wanting to show you, but I think that this hopefully will work for you. Again, background, the Wright's Crossing application was submitted to Island County on August 1st. It seeks to expand the UGA by approximately 248 acres plus roughly another 50 acres or so necessary to make the connection to our existing urban growth area. Per the applicant's materials, pose somewhere up to 1,500 single-family homes. City provided formal comment at the request of the applicant as well as Island County, provided those comments to the county on August 28th. We briefed the council on this matter at September 19th. That was our first formal briefing with you. Planning Commission on the 26th, council last week at your workshop. And at that workshop, you expressed an interest in seeing the resolution for this item appearing on this agenda this evening. So this is the map that, or one of the maps that the applicant had placed in their packet, or at least provided to the county. Again, by way of reference, this is our existing urban growth area here. In this case, the yellow is the area which is in the city limits. The pinkish color is the area that is not yet annexed by the city. The purple color are the properties that the applicant actually has under application. And then this sort of golden color here between the purple and the pink are those intervening properties that the county says they need to be there in order to connect Wright's Crossing to our existing urban growth area. Same thing, but a map prepared by the county, which again, difficult to see on the screen, but it actually does reflect the different zoning districts that the county has in this particular area, as well as the different current use categories that they may have, be they forest or be they public benefit rating system. Those are also reflected on there. So last two times we talked about this, we spent quite a bit of time on process. I'm not going to go through all of that in any great detail today. Just a couple of quick reminders. One, the county is in the lead. Primary question that they're asking right now, or have asked themselves, is does the application meet the criteria for a mid-cycle review as dictated by the countywide planning policies? And then the real fundamental question that they'll be considering is whether or not to docket the item for their 2018 comprehensive plan amendment process. As you know, we have a role also. We are involved at different stages through this process with the county. There are, in fact, multiple steps. Should it move through to the point of being on the docket, we're going to be talking about the buildable lands analysis again. Depending upon the results from that, we'd be talking about alternative measures analysis, which is a fancy way of saying we're going to have to look to see if more capacity is needed. Can we do that inside of what we have already, or do we have to look outside? That's the part for the location analysis. If you decide that you need capacity, where is that capacity going to be located? And we went through quite a bit of that in the last two briefings. And then also for your benefit are the RCWs and the WACs and the countywide planning policies are the things which dictate how we proceed. The resolution, as you heard me say at the last briefing, the existing countywide planning policies actually say that modifications proposed by individuals shall not be approved by the county unless the city supports them. County has interpreted that for this particular application process to mean they need the resolution in advance. They modified those criteria to meet what we identified as a unique set of circumstances, and the draft resolution that was provided to you as part of your packet meets their new criteria. It takes those 8 bullet points, if you will, came straight from the county in terms of the topics that we needed to address. I've squeezed all 8 of them onto this particular slide, and I won't read those to you per se. Number 1 and number 2, number 1 says that you endorse the further review and further consideration of the application. The second one is essentially saying that you would support the reevaluation of the buildable lands analysis, and you're committing city resources to helping the county do that. They are the lead for that, but they would need our help in certain areas. 3 and 4 relate to that alternative measures. One that you would understand as a council that step would be necessary, as I've just explained, if the BLA dictated that capacity was necessary. And that also you understand that we have to provide evidence to the county that we've gone through that analysis and discussed that with them. 5 and 6 are really saying that the council understands that you support the UGA boundary as proposed, but B, you acknowledge that in the event that a UGA expansion is actually necessary, the boundary could be different than the one that you see in the application. 6 is a first cousin to number 5. You're supporting the boundary and the potential location if that capacity is necessary. 7 is a statement that we know that we would also have to amend our comprehensive plan in order to be consistent with the county's comprehensive plan. And then 8, the city is acknowledging that it has the capacity to provide the necessary services to serve this area. So again, those 8 concepts came to us from the county. We've recreated that for you in the resolution, modifying the language just slightly so that it actually works in resolution form. Again, this is where we are this evening in terms of our overall schedule. Your recommendation this evening then is that you approve Resolution 1717 supporting Island County's further review of the Wright's Crossing application and committing the city to future actions. Again, I'd be happy to help with your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Before we discuss this here at the dais, I'll open it up for public comment. Again, just please state your name into the microphone. I do have, I believe, 4 signed up now, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak even if you're not signed up. But we'll begin, I think, with Kathy Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor Severance and councilmen and women. Kathy Phillips, 1192 Channel Lane, Oak Harbor. And I'm here this evening to encourage you to please approve this resolution. I know you've all put a lot of work into it, and also staff with this, but I encourage you to move this along for further review with the county. And I do hope that this resolution can make it over to the county in the morning. I was at a workshop a couple weeks ago, and a lot of information was sent over to the county, but it was received about an hour and a half before the meeting, and they weren't able to review it. So I hope for the workshop tomorrow that would go into effect. This just makes sense. It's a master plan development, and it will be a wonderful thing for our county. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next to sign up is Kathleen Sulek.
Kathleen Sulek, 2286 Darvik Place, Oak Harbor. Hello, everybody. I am opposed to your support of the Wright's Crossing development going any further. It seems Oak Harbor officials are trying to rush approval for Wright's Crossing through with no regard for the opinions of the current residents. From comments made by the people conducting the Island County Planning Commission meeting on September 25th, Oak Harbor city officials were in total agreement with the methodology used for the building and land analysis, which was just completed and adopted in December 2016. Now, just 10 months later, you don't want to abide by those statistics. A plan for 1,500 homes in a concentrated area on Whidbey Island is not a good plan. The added traffic of 1,500 to 6,000 possible vehicles daily would be horrendous. NAS Whidbey, for which this 1,500 home mega development is supposedly required, has rejected some findings of the Wright's Crossing applicant because some of the data is questionable. NAS has stated that they may be reducing the number of pilots coming to Oak Harbor, and they are doing a study to determine if the Navy needs to build more housing on base. Yes, they do. That way, much of the traffic concerns would automatically be alleviated. The housing market on Whidbey was in a serious depression. With an upswing in the economy in general and a turnaround in the housing market here, homes are now selling quickly. That does not mean we need to flood the market with new homes. There is a cycle of bust and boom in all real estate markets. As far as affordable housing is concerned, it would be wonderful if everyone could live where they worked. Unfortunately, that's just not possible. There are many people who commute off-island to work. If Oak Harbor has lots of job openings, these people need to hear about them. I'm sure they would love to end their daily grueling commute too. Whidbey Island is a great place to live. If you moved here to change it, go someplace else. I moved here because I like it the way it is now. Stop making money more important than a lifestyle that affords some peace of mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sulek. Stephen Sulek?
Hello, my name is Stephen Sulak. I live at 2286 Darvik Place, Oak Harbor. I'm here to ask you to reject this resolution and not have it go any further. I feel that the picture of coming down of Route 20 and seeing a mega complex of 1,500 homes in one little area just doesn't fit in with our landscape that we have right now and that we enjoy on Whidbey Island. And the added traffic is just, I don't see any good outcome from this, and I ask you to reject it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zulik. Leo Mitchell?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. City Council, thank you. My name is Leo Mitchell, 2220 Southwest Scenic Heights, Oak Harbor. I've recently gotten involved in this development. The comments went to the Planning Commission for the county. There's an awful lot of emotional discussion on both sides. I respect both sides of it, the environmentalists trying to conserve the island that we have, which is a beautiful place. But we do have some issues that need to be addressed. We do have a housing problem, and that has to be, I believe, the county and the city were looking at a commission to do affordable housing and how they would find it. We have a traffic problem. Going through Oak Harbor, trying to come off Scenic Heights and go to 20. Every day, I probably curse the traffic problem in Oak Harbor. I think we all do. But what I would ask the council is to approve the resolution, take advantage of the developer and his resources, combine it with your own and the county, and use this as an optimum opportunity to explore how we can correct traffic, how we can provide housing, and how we can make Oak Harbor a more vibrant community and take advantage of it. We can work, I think, collectively, and if we accept a lot of the environmentalists and the conservationists' input, I think we can protect some of their ideas, but we can also help grow the city and do it properly. I believe Wright's Crossing is a good step forward, but I think it needs to be monitored by yourselves and by the county. We have to do it with, I think, the vision that we want to make this a great place to live, like expressed by the conservationists. We don't want to try and have a booming metropolis, nor do we want to have a traffic problem. But we want to live in a great environment, and I think this is one way to help get us there. Thank you.
Okay. Open it up to anyone else here at this time that would like to speak.
My name is Scott Hampton from Waldron Construction. As one of the largest residential home builders on Whidbey, anyone would think that we would be excited about an opportunity like Wright's Crossing. However, I do not support this development. This proposal is a plan for our city to invest millions to make a Nevada developer wealthy. In past years, we provided affordable housing for the people of Whidbey and within the city of Oak Harbor. If the demand is there, we have the ability and the resources to produce the inventory required to meet those markets' needs. Why would the city give preferential treatment to an off-site development proposal when the developable areas within Oak Harbor can easily be met with the pace of the growth of Whitby. If you read the misleading news articles and the SEPA reports composed by Wright's Crossing, and then read the Navy reports in response to their applications, you can see that the sky is not falling on residential housing. It's merely a marketing tactic. For 30 years in business, we have followed proper protocol. Skipping these protocols or placing them out of order only costs everyone more. To solve this housing issue, the city needs to change internally. 4 years ago, we built exclusively in Oak Harbor. The process was easy, simple, and fluid. We were building a high volume of affordable housing within the city. In 2015, the future mayor of Oak Harbor asked me what we needed from the city to meet future housing demands. I told him that I need planning, building, and public works departments to work together with us to help us solve the problems that we'll face with infill. I asked for the Oak Harbor's help for Oak Harbor to help us resolve the upcoming changes in the codes and provide us with support as we venture into new regulation territories. If those areas were improved, then we would sustain steady growth and the city without creating an infrastructure nightmare. He promised that this would be his primary focus during his term. In 2014, we had 61 single-family building permits. In 2017, we have 27. The city development staff has not changed. They perform their jobs as they are asked to do by their leaders. This speaks volume about who is leading them to allow this catastrophic decline in the building development in the city of Oak Harbor. We currently have 2 projects that can create 200 homes in the city of Oak Harbor. I am disappointed in the city's leadership to give preferential treatment to a Nevada developer and push our 30 years of building locally to the sidelines. I ask that you please look further into the resources that we have right here without going outside of our city. Investing into a mirage development is not what the city needs. Question the background of Wright's Crossing, or you guys can call me and I'd be happy to show you the developments that we have that can show 200 homes that can be started immediately in Gary Oaks and Summerwind. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Therese Kingsbury, 1162 East Crescent Harbor Road. I'm a realtor, and before we left home tonight, I checked to find out how many homes are available right now in Oak Harbor under $250,000. There are 14. 4 of them are unloanable, and 3 of them are trailers that are also unloanable. The $250,000 home is on Salal in Northgate, and it needs repairs. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,000 square foot home. We need housing now, and it needs to be affordable.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Christine Cribb, Oak Harbor. I am the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. I think you've all received emails from me letting you know that the Housing Commission has certainly, the Legislative Affairs Committee at the Chamber of Commerce has placed housing as the #1 priority. I know that most of you probably live in big, beautiful houses that you've lived in for 20 or 30 years. However, if you were someone new coming to town making the medium income in Oak Harbor, it's very difficult to find housing. We're not asking you to follow every little step that Wright's Crossing is proposing. We're just asking you for further review. That's what this resolution asks for. That's what we're asking you to do tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Going once? Twice? Okay, we'll bring it back to City Council. And Mr. Powers is back to answer questions. Councilor Munns?
Thank you, Mayor. One question I have we checked with Anacortes for water supply? If if we expand to whether it's just 200 homes, as one person was saying, or 250, and then we add, do we have the water to give service to new homes, that many new homes?
We've not done any of that infrastructure review at this time, Ms. Munns.
Well, wait a minute, though. I think Mr. Merriman has.
Yeah, I might be able to add into that. I did, under the terms of our water service agreement with Anacortes, contact them. We have a provision in that agreement, if we're going to increase consumption materially, we need to give them some notice on that. So I sent them a memo in writing to let them know about the potential development and would they have the capacity to give us to supply water to them. They did respond back in writing and did say they would have that capacity. So there was no problem there with supplying water to it.
That's what I meant to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powers. I just want to check that out because being involved with Association Washington Cities, water is getting to be a real premium on the eastern side. And when we first moved here in the 70s, I can remember people buying some property in the Coopville area, not knowing, and then discovering either the land didn't perk or they didn't have water. And if you take one house per 5 acres, that is either a very expensive house or a really nice trailer with a big lawn, and they're putting in a well. So now you have all these wells coming from the aquifer, whereas if you have a more concentrated area of houses for people to live, you've got the water coming and it's not taking water from the aquifer. But Eastern Washington really needs some help on who has water rights and whatever. So I see this as a way. So thank you for finding that out, Mr. Powers and Dr. Merriman. That's the only question I have at this time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Powers, I'm hearing some testimonies this evening and before this evening about concerns on the impact of the development on transportation, traffic, impact on the environment. I think the state, the island county, and the city have tools to mitigate those impacts, like transportation problem on traffic. The city has tools to mitigate the impact on traffic and transportation. Currently, the city is working on updating transportation concurrency. Could you tell us more about transportation concurrency that will mitigate traffic?
Yes, it's a kind of a boring topic, Mr. Pagal, so I'll do my best to summarize it. In short, anytime we're at a project level, we're going to look at the impacts of traffic, whether it's a small neighborhood or a rather large neighborhood or a new business, a new store. We're going to look at a couple of fundamental things. One, how many trips are generated by that new activity? And secondly, what effect do those trips have on the surrounding street network? Those two components are the keys to transportation concurrency. And what transportation concurrency really is a concept which says that you need to study what those future impacts of that project are going to be, and then you need to offset those impacts either through construction of new facilities, improvements in the existing facilities, and or the collection of impact fees that will be used for future projects. And that's where the word concurrency comes from, is concurrent. So we're supposed to do that concurrent with the project. I'm condensing a lot of things, but that's the basic concept. So when we're looking at a project, we're going to figure out how many trips are being created at a particular point in time, which is when we measure those trips. We're going to figure out how do those new trips affect the surrounding streets in the intersections. What improvements might a project have to make in order to offset those improvements to the degree that that is possible? And then we're going to collect an impact fee, a per trip impact fee. Now, what I've just described for you is the model that we currently have. Our new model will be slightly different than that, but the concept would be the same.
Thank you. As a follow-up, those concerns about concerns on the environment, I think that will come at the time before the actual development starts. What we have tonight is just a resolution to be sent to Island County for the Island County to start the ball rolling. Actually, we're starting it with the resolution. The purpose of this resolution is to have approval of the Island County and to put them in their docket, and hopefully they will give priority to extend the urban growth area. We're not actually requesting the Island County to annex this property. It's just in the process. Is that fairly?
Yes, Mr. Pigal. You know, the purpose of the resolution is to signal the council's desire to see this application to continue through the county's process. And as I've said many, many times, it is a multi-step process.
Right. And in our last regular meeting, I mentioned that this is a very ambitious project because of the enormous acreage that will be added to the urban growth area. And I also mentioned about many roadblocks before this development goes through. And one of those roadblocks is for Island County to approve this resolution so they can include this in their docket, and hopefully they'll make priority to keep the ball rolling. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Pigal.
Yes, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you. One question with two parts. If we build 1,500 homes on that piece of property out there, whose responsibility is it to get the water to them? The water pipe for our water system stops at Waterloo or just around Waterloo. It's got to go out further. And if my memory serves me, we had to move a water pipe one time and it cost us $1 million a mile. So who's gonna pay to get the water to the houses?
Extension of the infrastructure is the developer's responsibility.
Okay, does that hold true also for getting a sewer pipe?
Yes, sir.
So they foot all that bill?
They're obligated to do that, yes.
Okay, thanks. That's the same answer I got the first time. Thanks.
Councilor
Remarkably
Servati.
consistent. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, I asked you this question in 2013. No, okay. So a couple of things I want to touch on, because when I get feedback from the public, pro or con, a lot of these concepts or concerns come up. And so I want to touch on a couple of those. It's interesting. The one thing I hear a lot of times when I'm talking to folks is, why does the public process, why does the government process move so slow? And now it seems like we're trying, we've met this situation where we're not trying to skip any part of the process, but definitely, I think, keep the process moving along in an expedited manner. And so that's one of the concerns I get, and I don't know what the right answer is there. Do we slow down? Do we speed up? We talked about this during the previous administration, the housing shortage, so I don't think we're going too fast. The number of permits, I've mentioned that several times. I looked those up, and I could give anyone the email that wants it, but if you look at the last 11 years, we've averaged 56.45 single-family residences. One of those years, the last year, actually, that we had any multifamily was 10 years ago. So since then, there's been no multifamily. And 2007 was our last big year. I think it was 105. I could pull it up. But over those 11 years, we averaged 56 homes. Last 10 years, we've averaged, if you take out that one big year, it drops down to about 51. And I don't know what the right number is. We have a professional planner in front of us, but I figured if we have 6,000-ish utility connections, so it doesn't have to be a single-family home, but let's talk about a residential unit. Could be multifamily or single-family. Is there any kind of a indicator of what a city should grow at, what rate?
Not in the way that I think that you're asking the question. I mean, I think our historic Historic growth, as we've looked at the 20-year horizon, has been right around 2,000 individuals. So it's not a tremendous growth rate over a 20-year horizon. So your home starts are, in line with your population growth that we've experienced. I mean, our actual growth from year to year is a fairly small number.
Okay. And so, my simple math was if we had 6,000 living units, homes, multifamily, 1%, 60, 2%, 120, I don't know to what degree we need to grow. One of the concerns when you see that number, it's a big number. That's not all at once, obviously. That would be rolled out in phases over, I've heard the number from the developer of 6 to 8 years. So if it took 2 years to get this thing really rolling, that completion date might be 8 to 10 years from now. Water, I continue to get that question. I was trying to find an email. I had emailed Arnie, I think it was Mr. Peterschmidt gave me a number, reviewing our current consumption, our capacity, and I want to say it was at 40-ish%, 35, 40%. Don't quote me on that, but there seemed to be sufficient water because people ask that question, as well as does our sewer plant have the capacity to take on something like this? The BLA methodology, that comes up a lot. And I'm the first one to raise my hand. Yes, we voted for that. I approved it. When you're going through the process, you assume, and once again, this is not against anyone, county or city staff, but you approve that methodology, or we did approve it. But then I really got involved in the process, and when I dug into it, I don't know if there's anyone in this room that would say there is not a housing shortage. Maybe there is someone in this room that could say that, but in general, we have a concern as far as housing, especially, I hate the term, affordable housing, whatever that means, but homes that people can afford that are maybe starting out or on median to lower median incomes. So for me, I'm okay with saying I was wrong. I want to take another look at it, and that's part of what this resolution speaks to is let's knuckle down and figure out how we improve this process. Is it rezoning, upzoning? Is it rights crossing as well? I think it's all of the above for me personally. So I'm perfectly capable of admitting I voted for that, but if I could, I would go back and change my vote. It's that simple. Traffic, it's relative. I forget who spoke. I think it was Mr. Mitchell wrote on traffic that I too have to turn on to Scenic Heights to get home. And there are times when it's backed up for a couple of blocks. Well, to me, that's fairly relevant traffic. It's also weather dependent. I've conducted a study when it's raining in the summer, there's no traffic. It's amazing. If it's a sunny day, same time from 4 to 6 p.m. If it's sunny, there's traffic. If it's raining, there's not. So what might this bring? Mr. Mitchell, it was you because I circled it, brought this point out. It's a chance to solve that problem. Let's get the roundabout in. Let's get some serious traffic studies done, do it combined state, maybe some federal money as well as local dollars. The city, Mr. Campbell, you brought that up. I'm glad you did, that question. This is not the city investing. This is private money putting in that infrastructure if it went forward. So for that reason, I would support it as well. As Mr. Begau also touched on, this is the chance for this to go, for me, I want to support it, so it has the chance to go through this public vetting. I didn't bring the letter to the editor that I was going to, but I talked about it in the workshop. I'll mention it briefly here because it'll probably be a different crowd that might watch this video. Recent letter to the editor talked about the concerns about the increase in crime, the increase in traffic, the tax on our water and septic systems. Well, I don't know if they meant to say sewer, but as we've touched on, we have capacity in both of those areas. They also talked about the strain, all the people flooding into our stores and shops. For some people, that might be a valid concern. I don't think if you went down Pioneer Way or talked to most of the shop owners, that's their main concern, is having more people to walk into their store. So there is a balance between protecting view corridors, protecting the environment, obviously, but we also have a critical need here to solve what I see as a fairly endemic housing problem. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Wassinger.
Thank you, Mayor. I too appreciate all of the public comments and input through this process. I will say, someone mentioned about how fortunate maybe we are to live in our homes and have been there for 20 years. Well, I want to say I'm not that old. I haven't lived in my home for 20 years. Let's make that clear first. But I do appreciate, I believe it was Mr. Mitchell who mentioned how important it is for us to work together with the county and with our staff and with the process that this is going to happen, to undertake anytime that we build a neighborhood, build housing. It has to be a situation where we work together with the parties necessary to make sure that we do it correctly and that we solve some of these issues. But you know what? And also, as Mr. Pagal said, we're not there yet. This is a process to put this forward to the county and say, yes, we would like to work with you. We would like for you to continue looking at our housing, looking at our buildable lands, whatever it takes. We obviously have an issue. I find building 50 housing units not acceptable. I want to live in Oak Harbor, hopefully, and until I'm old and gray and my kids are grown and maybe they want to come back here and live here and work here and have a job. And I think that we need a little bit more steady growth. I think we need a little more growth. And I think that anytime that we can put that forward to the county and say, please help us, please look at this, please look at our buildable lands again, whatever it takes to ensure that our city can continue to flourish, that our businesses, this isn't just about Navy housing. This is about me, who's a civilian, who wants to live here, and maybe my kids will be civilians here. Maybe they will be in the Navy. That would be fine too. Whatever they choose to do. But I want them to be able to have that opportunity to own a home and a starter home at that. So I am supportive of this just for the fact to have a second look at it and to do something for the growth of our city economically and housing. Thank you.
Councilor Heisen?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Powers, I have a couple of questions before I delve in any deeper. The statistics that you presented at the workshop and then emailed us, thank you for those. Projects, quote, able to be developed in the last 5 years, 243 single-family units, one of which is complete, one of which has construction underway, 2 of which were approved, but the applicant is not ready to build, and 2 of which are currently in plan review. One of the projects currently in plan review is the Gary Oak subdivision, with which Mr. Hampton referenced. So those projects are in review. The one is, I think, 135 single-family homes. I'm not. Well, we don't need to get into the minutia of a particular application, but when something says it's currently in plan review, and then the builder comes and says, we're ready to do this right now. Like, where's the disconnect there? How long does the review process take? What's the next step? If we have 1, 2, about 150 single-family homes currently in review.
Thank you for the guidance about not going into the minutia.
Yeah,
because this could go south quickly.
Simplify it for me.
I think actually the very simplest thing for me to say is that the development approval process and the regulations that we are required to follow are way more complex than anybody wants them to be, staff and the applicant. And so when the data that I provided to the council said that something was under review, what that means is that we've done our part of the review and we've given it back to the applicant, and they are working on their response to those comments. Okay. Think about the when you're seeing a television show or the movies, they're playing chess and they've got the clock, 2 clocks, and you hit the button and you stop and you start. We have a clock that we have to operate under by state law. Mm-hmm. We meet that obligation under state law every single time. Part of that time we're responsible for what happens with the project, and part of the time the applicant and his or her team are responsible for that project. And so where we are right now on the Gary Oak subdivision is that actually the majority of that is with us, and we are looking at it right now. There's a component of it where the applicant is working on it, and they need to be working on that in order for us to complete the work that we have. Okay?
That makes sense.
Just real quickly, without diving down too deep, the project's located on the highway. Obviously, the Department of Transportation has some role in looking at a subdivision of greater than 100 units. The applicant's required to coordinate with them on those aspects of the project. We can't complete our review until we have that input because it could change what happens inside of the boundaries of the project itself. I appreciate Mr. Hampton's desire to build houses, but it's more than just the builder, it's the civil engineer, it's the geotechnical person, it's the traffic engineer, it's the coordination with all of those disciplines with the state, it's coordination with all those disciplines with the city. Then eventually, it'll come through the hearing process before the Planning Commission and the council, and we'll keep marching our way towards those building permits. But I'll conclude the same place I started, which it is unfortunately a far more complicated and lengthy process than any of us want it to be.
Thank you. Fantastic explanation. That was just the right amount of detail. Some people say that there, isn't enough buildable land in the Oak Harbor area. Some people say that there is, and I see that there are 67 single-family homes where the plat has been approved, but the applicant is not ready to build. And so that's 67 houses that theoretically could be started now if the applicant was ready to actually begin construction. I mean, is that just a economics thing?
It's
or?
always hard to predict.
Sure.
Typically, it is some level of economics on their side of the equation.
Right.
And for the projects that I think that are listed on there, both of those have reached this very significant milestone of having preliminary plat approved. That's a seminal point in the process. That means that they have the entitlements to those lots on that particular piece of property. The next stages for them are to do their plans for all of their infrastructure. And then they put that infrastructure in, and then at some point in that process, they submit their final plat, and we come back to you as a council, and ultimately you accept that final plat. And that's when those lots are created. That's when a lot can be sold.
Right.
But the fact that the preliminary plat has been approved is really a very significant step for them, and that's the case with both of those.
Thank you. That really highlights this process takes longer than anybody would like it to be. There are so many steps that if we did take action tonight and the county docketed this and put it on their 2018, I mean, this doesn't mean that anyone's going to start construction this year or next year or the year after that. Looking at the number of single-family projects currently in review or have been approved shows us that it's, well, you've only issued X number of building permits. Like, yeah, but we're either reviewing or have approved 243 single-family homes in the last 5 years. So it's complicated, and it speaks to the length of time and the complexity of the issue and the economics of building. A developer might have been in a position to do something a few years ago and not anymore, or vice versa. I know that we've run into that a couple of times. I'll get to my concerns in a second. Just to be absolutely 100% clear, when this resolution says things like this commits the city to supporting the application, we'd be committing necessary resources to review and undertake special studies. What I hear is we're committed to allowing this application to advance. We're not committed to put our mark of approval on the application as is, because it keeps saying support the application, support the application. Is that the process or the application? And what's the difference?
I think the county is looking for the language that is in this resolution, a statement of the council's support for the application as you presently understand it. I don't think that the council, or the county rather, is asking for the council to quote unquote approve the project, because frankly that's not your role at this point in the process. So this language that they've requested be in the resolution is intended for the council to signify your support, both for the concept of this moving forward through what is primarily the county's process, but also your commitment of staff resources and/or other resources in order to do the work which is necessary on the city's side. But there is language in here that says you support the location. And so that's part of what the county has asked for you to make some level of policy statement on.
Okay. And you touched on resources, which was my next question. Number 8 on the resolution. Number 8. It says, the city will provide evidence of capacity and a plan for providing adequate public services to new areas added to the urban growth area. I'm not sure who defines adequate in terms of public services. I already have very, very grave concerns about how we can provide that to developments that already exist in that quadrant of town. So things like number 8 are why I want to know what exactly we're telling the county, because if we're saying, oh yeah, we got this, when we don't got this, that concerns me.
The city would use our adopted levels of service as our barometer for measuring what is quote unquote adequate. Okay. And so embodied in your comprehensive plan today, as well as your capital facilities plan, are those things known as levels of service. And so we have a way of measuring level of service for traffic. We have a way of measuring level of service for water. We have a way of measuring level of service for fire service protection. Each of those are standards, policies that you are striving to achieve inside of the city limits, inside of the urban, and inside of the urban growth area as those areas annex. And so that's how your staff would look at the term adequate, is we would look to our adopted levels of service and say that's the minimum service level that we need to hit. And then to determine that, you would go through an extensive process to figure out what's necessary in terms of extending the water lines in order to make sure that we're meeting that level of service, what's necessary to extend the sewer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Councilmember Servadia said something, not sure if it was the last meeting or the one before, that he supports this application or project, quote, in its infancy. Is that what you said? And I have some really serious concerns about the project overall, but it's kind of like how we have to second a motion that we may or may not agree with in order to have a conversation about it. We can't talk about it until it has a second, which we've all done, just to be able to open it up to conversation. That's how I'm viewing this resolution, is we'll put a second on it so that it can be brought forward for conversation. I don't necessarily agree with or approve all of it. I don't think this is a panacea that will solve all of our housing problems, and I don't think it's the apocalypse either. I guess if and when it comes back to us, then I can talk about all my concerns, because they're not really relevant at this point. Would that be a fair statement? They're not really relevant at this point.
I'm not going to presume to tell a council member what's relevant to your conversation or not. I'd like to think I'm a little smarter than that.
So basically, it's irrelevant, and I can save
Again,
those.
Your words, not mine.
No, I understand, which is why I wanted to clarify that basically we're saying that we support the process going forward and the discussion continuing. Before I didn't want to put my signature on anything that committed me to anything beyond that.
And your commitment to following the appropriate steps, like that reference to the alternative measures analysis.
Mm-hmm.
That's an acknowledgement on behalf of the city of Oak Harbor that should the additional capacity be necessary from a buildable lands analysis perspective, we're going to do the things that Councilman Servadius has referenced. We're going to look at upzoning. We're going to look at changing our densities. We're going to look at maybe converting land from non-residential to residential. Once we've exhausted those possibilities, that either we can do it or we can't do it,
right.
Then that's the case where you would be able to start to look outside of the boundaries. That's the kind of commitment that the county is looking for right now.
perfect. I think Mr. Mitchell, nailed it in his reference to being able to leverage our resources regionally to study and hopefully solve some of these problems. I think worst case scenario, I mean, at the very least, that will happen. So I would support this conversation continuing. And if it does end up back in front of us, then we'll talk about my issues then. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion we approve Resolution 1717.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve Resolution 1717. Motion by Campbell, second by Munns. Any other? Yes, Councillor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. I had actually brought a copy, and I would move to amend a couple of words, and I'll pass this out to all of my peers. There's nothing earth-shaking here. I'll review the changes. So I guess in essence, this will be a motion to amend. I added 3 words, and it's before the bullet points in this copy. They're in red. It just says, wherever it says endorse or support, I added the word strongly. Island County has asked multiple times, well, Commissioner Johnson has asked for a city statement on this UGA expansion in this application, so I added that word on numbers 1, 2, and 5. And then on number 1, I think it's one of those things, it's a foregone conclusion because we sit here and talk about it, but the purpose of this is to have this application on their 2018 docket for review. Nowhere in the resolution did it specifically say that, so I just added the words on number 1 there and its inclusion on the 2018 Island County Board of County Commissioner docket. So I would move to amend Resolution 1717 with the words legislative edits in red. It's probably the simplest way.
I'll second that.
So we've got a motion and a second to amend Resolution 1717 as presented by Councillor Servadius. That motion to amend is by Councillor Servadius, second by Heisen. So we'll discussion about that. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the amendment, putting the word strongly. That will put more teeth in this resolution. And hopefully the Island County will put this as priority in their docket when their planning commission starts in their meeting. That's all I have.
Anyone else? So we'll vote first on the amendment. Seeing no additional. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And we'll go back to the original motion. And all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? So that's motion as amended. Okay? Any other discussion? Okay. We are done with ordinances and resolutions, and we have one item left on our agenda for tonight, and that's under contracts and agreements, consultant agreement, Carollo Engineers for Effluent Reuse Clean Water Facility Amendment Number 18. We have our engineer Brett Arvidsson here.
Good evening. This was an item that we brought before you at the September 19th meeting. Is for amendment number 18 for our agreement with Carollo Engineers. It's regarding the clean water facility effluent reuse. I'm going to kind of go back to the same presentation. I hope to address some of the questions that we received last time. Talk about a background again. Our clean water facility is going to be producing a high quality water, and right now we're just planning to discharge it into the harbor. It can be used for other uses, such as irrigation. And an interesting thing I found just in the last couple of months, that we're spending about $40,000 a year irrigating Windjammer Park. So at this point, with the upgrades we have and the facility we have, utilizing this effluent is very cost efficient. And so I'm excited about this because it provides us many advantages in the sustainability, environmental, but it's also a cost return. And that's my favorite kind of environmental return. some concern was expressed at the last meeting about the timing of this. I think this is a good time for us and for a lot of reasons that are pretty complex. And what happens is reuse is regulated as part of our NPDES permit, and that's our federal state permit that governs our wastewater. Our old permit expired in 2015, and DOE is preparing us a new permit for our clean water facilities. So even if we wanted to talk about a reuse, we didn't have the ability until just recently. They are issuing us a new permit, and we're in the process of discussing with that. Another factor that's going on is the state of Washington DOE is also issuing new administrative rules for reuse, which is called WAC 1732-9. That's under evaluation now. And they weren't going to issue any new permits on reuse until that administrative process was adopted. So based on these two factors, we really couldn't tell you what reuse is and what the plan was, because the regulatory framework wasn't in place, nor was the administrative framework. We had some ideas about it, and we proceeded with the assumptions we're going to do it. And so at that point, developing a firm cost for the plan was pretty hard, because there are a lot of unknowns, and we didn't want to pursue that, and we had other priorities to deal with too at the time. Stepping back to Windjammer itself, the new park we're talking about is 25 acres, and about 15 acres of that is irrigatable, and like I say, it's a good candidate for effluent reuse. Now, implementing reuse is again, a somewhat regulatory process. And for us to do reuse in the plant, we have to obtain DOE approval through our NPDES permit process. It's an attachment to that. Our effluent reuse would be eligible for SRF funding. DOE would require us to provide them with the effluent reuse plan that documents the operational parameters of the plant. For us to implement it, it's also I want to make clear, most of that we're talking about is minor modifications to our facility. I showed you earlier a picture of a tank, and that's probably we're going to buy another one of those and a pump. But a big part of the issue is dealing with the regulatory and making sure it's all done properly. Our park irrigation system would require purple pipe and some cross-connection control, and that's always been assumed in our Windjammer plans. And again, it's not a big cost. We would provide signage and public education. And once the reuse plan is permitted, we have to go through a certain amount of, we have the ability to expand that system in the future, and it becomes an administrative process. We don't have to reopen permits. It's basically, we'll send a report in, and so we can do amendments very easily. So if we want to expand to another park or do a car wash or something, it becomes a lot simpler at that point, because we have the regulatory framework already approved in place. Now, there was some question on the use of our clean water facility effluent, especially with regards to lot. Under the new administrative rules we're seeing, human contact requires what they call an A+ reuse classification, and that requires a higher level of treatment and some other requirements. The lot plant is actually only an A classification under the new rules, and they were not permitted for human contact. They were permitted for a water feature. And they went subsequently under the old regulatory framework, went to their county health department and got it classified as a swimming pool, and they've treated it as a swimming pool ever since then. But it's not really, we'd not be able to get that same deal under the new administrative rules. The A+ classification requires much higher levels of monitoring, operation, and treatment. Our treatment plant we'd have to add more treatment even past what we're doing, which is pretty high end to begin with. The A+ classification also requires not only DOE approval, but we'd have to actually go to the state health department, not the county like Lot did, and also get a permit and monitoring from them. We looked at it at the time, and the benefits of the A+ reuse program are just not cost effective for us. The amount of money we're saving for the splash park would not even pay for the monitoring costs we would be dealing with. So we want to go with the Class A, and that allows for a lot of uses, just not human contact. The cost of reuse, the Carollo Amendment 18 is entirely required to address the requirements of the WAC administrative rule. The extent of the system will be determined by the outcome of the report. Right now, if we just do irrigation, if we do 200 gallons per minute irrigation, the price will be half of 400 gallons. So we just need to lock down those numbers. Again, it's not a big magnitude of change. The most likely technical scenario is just adding a tank and a pump. We already have the disinfection system, chlorination, and all that. And there's some possibility we may be able to use our utility water system, but there's some complications with that. And as I said, the distribution costs are anticipated in the Windjammer Park design. Carollo's scope of work is to evaluate the best way to implement reuse within the plant in the park, design the system. It does have to coordinate with our utility water system, prepare the reuse plan for DOE approval, obtain the DOE approval. We have to do a plan approval, which is very easy right now because we're in contact with them, so we can do that with the minor amendment to the plans we have, so we're not creating new plans. And assist with the public education. Amendment number 18 does amend their contract. It adds Carollo and Greenworks and Enviro issues in a cost of $78,432. That makes our total contract with them at $17,947,421. And the actual construction work will be incorporated in the Clean Water Facility and Windjammer construction project, so we won't see much in the way of actual construction costs because that'll be dealt with through contingency changes. In the start of the system, best we'd view it fall of 2018, but most likely the spring of 2019. And the recommended action is for the mayor to sign the amendment number 8 in the amount of $78,432, raising the contract amounts there by the amounts we're talking about. Questions?
Okay, before we take that on here at council, I'll see if anyone in public would like to speak to this. Now would be the time. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Questions? Yes, Councilor Munson.
Thank you, Mayor. In a roundabout way, I'll try to explain it. Is there a way that if the splash park has to be potable water, is there a way to recycle it somehow, either to filter it and put it back into the park or to divert it and use it someplace else? The reason I ask is UT in Austin waters their football field. They have a tray underneath. They collect the water that isn't absorbed. They can recycle it and reuse it again. So if we're having to spend for potable water for the splash park, is there a way to recycle it somehow so we're getting more value for the water coming up and kids having fun, but you know, so it's not a complete waste, either put into the irrigation or if there's a not expensive filter that it could be done so it could actually be recycled and put back into the splash park.
Yeah, that is something we did evaluate as part of the splash park design and the technical side with Greenworks. And unfortunately, it becomes like a swimming pool. So we're spending about $5,000 to $10,000 a year for the water in the splash park. And that's what, for example, Mount Vernon spends now. The problem is for us to recycle it like a swimming pool or something that the health department would allow us to do, we'd have to put in a pool filtration system, and that's about $250,000. Plus we'd have to operate it, which is, you know, a certain cost. So we looked at the payback to that system and it just didn't pencil. Can we put the water into like local irrigation or something like that? That's certainly a possibility, but unfortunately I don't think there's a lot of good sources nearby. You know, we're talking 2 million gallons a year or so. It would really probably not be feasible because just the fact is just, you know, not a lot to irrigate out there, and we'd rather use our reuse.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
Now, it's something we were pretty active about looking into because I wanted to recycle as much as we can, but as we started looking at the cost, and there's certain things we're doing in the splash park like switches and there's things that really cuts back on our water use. So we're trying to make it as efficient that way just because of the control system we're putting into. Like kids walk up, there'll be a motion sensor that actually turns on the water for them, and it'll be on timers and stuff like that.
I know that splash park is like #1 in the lot of all ages minds that
Yeah.
we will have that, and it will be fun and different and unique. But if there's any way to recycle and use that water elsewhere, let's think about it now instead of an afterthought. So thank you.
Okay, Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. You said, quote, start of the system, fall of 18, maybe spring of 19. Did system mean
The irrigation
Okay.
system.
I was
So what has
about
to
to have a heart
happen, what has to happen is we got to get the treatment plant up and running, and, that'll be, July, August, when we have it to the point where we're meet our permit requirements. And problem is that we'll be doing work in the park, and so I'd like to do some irrigation. We may do some local around the plant, but the fact of the matter is, we probably won't be planting a lot of stuff till late October, so we won't be irrigating that time of year. So, like I say, I'm not promising that, because I think more likely we'll put it in full service in the fall and the spring.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Okay, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Can you pull up slide 7, please, Brett? There was something on there I was trying to...
Which one's?
One more. No, sorry, that's 5. So the last bullet point there, when we look at all 5 phases, or I know we combined 1 and 2 together, will this plan that Carollo and Greenworks and Viro Issues is doing, is this cover all 5 phases, future phases?
All the park.
All the park, okay.
Because by the time we get done fixing the irrigation system, there isn't much left.
Right. No, and I appreciate the cost savings here. I know I kind of grilled you last time, and you guys did a good job in the bi-weekly meeting, construction meeting we do, explaining the bigger picture. I felt like it wasn't necessarily budgeted, some of these items, but you did a good job today, and then also explaining, the costs and what it was going to entail. And obviously, if we can reuse that stuff and save money, I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, input? What would the council like to do? Councilor Heisen.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign contract amendment number 18 with Carollo Engineers.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign contract amendment number 18 with Carollo Engineers. Any other motion by Heisen, second by Servadius? Seeing no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. And I believe that was the last item on tonight's agenda. So seeing no further business, we will stand adjourned.